And everybody, welcome to Correspondence Week, brought to you by Planet FPL. My name's Serge.
And my name is James.
And if you are a new listener, you will not know that we have 20 different Planet FPL correspondents, one for each team in the Premier League, writing articles, engaging in Twitter, jumping on podcasts from time to time, and giving us the insight that we might not have on certain teams if we are not fans. This week is 20 podcasts, 5 days, one from every single correspondent. And this, James, is the first one up. So no pressure. Introduce our correspondent and let's get into it.
Well, might as well start with a person who's going to be at the top of most people's transfers in following game week 1 this year, I suggest. We are joined by Gary at Is My Cap, CAP, playing. How are you, Gary?
I'm good, thank you. How are you two?
We are very well, thank you, mate.
Super. Really excited for these Correspondence Week, to be honest with you, because there's so much good content. And I think a few heads might spin by the end of it, where new names will get thrown out or popular picks might get rubbished a little bit. So, really excited for this Correspondence Week. How are you feeling about the upcoming season? I mean, you had a great second half of the season. As a fan, are you looking forward to it for Man United? What are your kind of hopes?
Definitely looking forward to this season more than we're looking forward to last season. Like you say, we kicked on a lot at the end of last season. As it stands, the transfer windows worry me a little bit. We don't look to have kicked on. We had a great opportunity at the end of last season to really kick on, and we don't seem to have done that yet. And you look at the business Chelsea are doing already, and they finished, a couple of points behind us in the end, and they've gone very big very quickly. And as it stands, we've done nothing. So that's a worry. But other than that, definitely looking forward to it.
Was there any disappointment on Seville, Gary? Has that kind of left a bit of a negative feeling around the club a bit, do you think?
I would hope so, and I would think so, because if you get to European semi-final and then lose like that, I think you've got to be disappointed. I think they played well in the first half, but another semi-final defeat. That's 3 semi-finals this season. The other 2 we were appalling. We played well this time, but again, 3 losses out of 3 in semi. So it's got to be a disappointment, and hopefully it can be something that they kick on from and learn from. But we'll see about that next season. But on a personal note, I was disappointed. People say, it was only the Europa League, but it's a European trophy. Winning the Carling Cup's a big thing, or the Carabao Cup. So winning the Europa League would have been a huge thing. So, yeah, I think it's a disappointment, and I think the players would have been disappointed, especially to lose playing well as well.
You had a shitload of chances at the start of that second half. It's ridiculous, mate.
Yeah.
But do you think there's anything in that? I mean, 3 semi-finals, that's a little concerning, isn't it? Is it a big game mentality? It doesn't feel like that, because you've had victories against City over the last year or so, and that, so it doesn't feel that way particularly.
No, I don't know. I mean, none of the 3 losses in the semi-finals had the same pattern or anything. We were outplayed in the first leg against City, and then I think we beat them in the second leg, but I think we were already 3-1 down by then. The Chelsea FA Cup game, we rested a few, and it was in that awkward end of season bit where we had too much going on. And then on last Sunday, they played well. You can't say, they bottled it, or the tactics were wrong, or they played well. And if you don't finish your chances, and Sevilla are quite a streetwise team, and once you don't take your chances and it stays 1-1, you knew what was coming. You knew it was coming, that we were going to get beat. But so not worried as a pattern, but it is a worrying step that we just haven't taken that next step to a final, or another year without a trophy now. So. Hopefully they learn from it, but we'll see.
The winning goal was sloppy defensively, as were a few of the goals in Chelsea FA Cup semi-final as well. If we can start there, kind of turning towards FPL, are you at the moment, considering United assets defensively? I know there's quite a bit of talk about Luke Shaw at 5 million, although we don't know at the moment if he's going to make the start of the season or not.
I aren't considering any at the minute, purely because of the pricing. You've got Lindelof and Shaw are a bit cheaper, I think, aren't they? And Maguire and Wan-Bissaka are 5.5, and I feel you're either going to go up to the Doherty's, apologies, Alexander Arnold. You know,
that's
you're going to
the
go
whole of Ireland just switched off.
I know, yeah. I'll have to say something about Roy Keane or something.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, I think you know, if you're gonna spend money in your defence, you're either gonna go to that top level to get, you know, the Trents and the Robertsons, etc., or Doherty, or you're gonna come to the 4.5s and get the Burnley defenders or the couple of Wolves lads that are down there. I think that 5.5 levels, it's neither out nor something. And anyone considering Luke Shaw, I mean, he must have pork pies for brains, because he's not an FPL option, and he never will be.
Can you elaborate on that, Gary?
Well, he probably won't play. He probably won't play every game, so you might miss a few of the clean sheets. He's attacking. The idea that Luke Shaw's an attacking fullback in FPL terms is laughable, really. I had a look the other week for something. In his whole Premier League career, including Southampton, he has got 12 attacking returns. He's got 1 goal and 11 assists in his career. So the idea that he's an FPL option, even at 5 million, to me, I'm not seeing it. And I think Williams might pressure him for a place. And if you're going to go at 5 million, I'd probably prefer to go for Lindelof, because he's probably going to play, unless we buy a centre-back, he'll probably be playing 35 matches, plus maybe all of them. I mean, I don't know what Lindelof's goal returns are like, but he seems to get a couple a season. If I was going to go for 5 million, I'd go Lindelof. I wouldn't go Luke Shaw if I could have him as a 16th man in my squad. Just wouldn't bother.
That's really interesting, because I feel that there's a lot that have lent towards Luke Shaw in the Twitter community, and the thing that's putting him off is obviously the fitness doubts, whether he's going to make game week 1 or not. Otherwise, I think a lot of people be going there. So I think a lot of people are going to be really surprised to hear you say that.
I mean, I mean, at 5 million, and he's playing for a top 3 team on paper, it's not the worst thing you could ever do. I just don't see it. I think I'd rather, if you're going to stick with United, you know, go for Lindelof, or just pay the extra 500,000 and get Maguire if he's available, which we might come on to. But I just don't see it with United defensively. Anyway, I mean, our clean sheet record last season was good, but you know, it's just an awkward price. I can't believe there's many people who are planning on having 5.5 or 5 million defenders. I think everyone will either have the 7s and the 6.5s or the 4.5s. It's just, and until you see, you know, if we start off with 4 clean sheets in 6 and Luke Shaw's playing every week, then you might think, right, I've got some trust in God. But starting the season with them, especially with the blank in the first match, I just don't see the point. I just don't see why you would do it.
It's funny, I've got a 5 million defender in my draft squad at the moment, but he's not one of your boys. He's one of James's boys, and Eric Dyer. And I think I'd favour him over Luke Shaw or Lindelof at the moment. What about taking a step further back into the goalkeeping position? We talked last week, and I shouldn't say this week, last week, because the timescales of all of our pods are now so messed up.
Yeah.
About how both Dean Henderson and David De Gea are 5.5 million. And the ownership numbers were more people had gravitated towards Dean Henderson. I think he, at the time, when we looked at the differentials, in our differential show, was 6% versus De Gea's 3.5 or 4 or something along those lines, which kind of you'd conclude that maybe more people think that Dean Henderson might get the nod. Do you have any thoughts, insight into that, maybe?
Well, I mean, I assume people thought Henderson was going back to Sheffield United. I can't believe people are looking at those two players, and because there is no doubt in my mind that De Gea will start as number 1.
Really?
I think Henderson's been brought back to put a bit of pressure on, and I still wouldn't be, given that we've still got Romero there, I still wouldn't be surprised if they try and find another loan for Henderson, and maybe not a bigger club, because Sheffield United were obviously 8th last season, and you know, did incredibly well. But in terms of the stature, whether they try and find a European team who are in the Europa League or something like that, because the idea that we're going to have Romero, Henderson, and De Gea sat around doesn't seem likely. But De Gea will start as number 1. They've had ample opportunity to decide that he's not good enough, and they've kept him. So it's not going to change now, I don't think.
Do you prefer Henderson stay as a number 2, or would you prefer to him, probably bad example, but go to, say, Chelsea for a year and play there?
I wouldn't see the point in keeping as number 2. I would either say, look, he's our number 1 keeper and just start playing him, or find him another loan. You know, like I say, if you could get him to, I don't know any examples in Europe, but if you could get him to a Europa League team, or a Champions League team, you know, one of the sort of who might be an also-ran, and just getting that European experience, and then he might be able to come straight back in next season. But keeping him as number 2, because it'd just be a very weird situation, wouldn't it? And I don't think De Gea would respond well to that either. So.
Yeah, I think De Gea's either number 1 or off. I've suggested I think it's a good time for you to transition, because I don't think there's reasonable expectation to win the league. I think United fans obviously expect more this season. It's not reasonable to expect to win the league. I think it's a good year to transition it, is what I've said previously. But I don't think having De Gea on, some ridiculous wages, sitting as the number 2 goalkeeper is really a viable option. It's not something he's going to accept either. So I just felt like the time was now. I also don't think it's right for Dean Henderson to be sitting on anybody's bench at the moment either. He's come on so well that he should be playing football at the moment. I wonder if potentially, if he's going to hang around, it might be a case that De Gea plays all the league games, for example, and Henderson plays League Cup, FA Cup, and maybe even Champions League as well. Perhaps in the group stages, for example, might be a possibility.
Yeah. Possibly, yeah. I'd not thought of that. That might be what they do, but even then, you might only be talking 12 matches. It's given that he probably played every match of the last 2 seasons for Sheffield United, didn't they? So, you know, goalkeepers are funny things. They can be flying, and all of a sudden, they can, you know, look at someone. I mean, it's a long time ago. Look at someone like Ben Foster, was unbelievable. Was he at Watford before he came?
For the 2009 League Cup final against us, yes, I remember.
Saved some penalties, didn't he? But yeah, he did really well for Watford and a couple of other loans maybe, and then he sort of sat around the United squad as Van der Sar's understudy and came in, and he was nowhere near it. And then obviously he still had gone on to have a great career, but you know, you might do the same with Henderson. You might say, "Oh, just sit on the bench for a year," and before you know it, that momentum he's built up has gone.
I agree. Yeah,
so easily be lost.
Yeah, I think try and find him another loan where he can play 40 games for a top side, or play him. You know, none of this middle ground.
Look, I'm going to say this. We've now given United's defence already 7 minutes of airtime. And let's be honest, none of us are interested in you defensively, because Fernandes, Rashford, Greenwood, Martial, and whoever knows any other players you may decide to buy from the German league or wherever. There's going to be so many attacking assets that quite often it feels to me like a defensive United assets restricting me from getting 3 in. Like I've in so many of my drafts, I've already had them. They're not at the prices of some of the Liverpool guys or the City guys, which means they are affordable. Martial is comparable to Vardy in terms of price, and only a little bit is cheaper than Kane and Aguero. Not that I don't know if you want to compare them. Fernandes is cheaper than De Bruyne, Salah, so on and so on and so on. Greenwood, 7.5 million. Let's talk attack.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like you said, that front four, you know, any of them, they're probably about price right, all of them, given them what they did last season. You know, if Sancho comes, I don't think he is now. I think that time's gone. But if Sancho comes, that'll complicate things again. But even if it's just Fernandes, Martial, Rashford, and Greenwood, you know, where do you start? I mean, it's unfortunate that we're not playing in game week 1, because it's just you don't know when to go in on them now, do you? You can't.
Yeah, I do. Game week 2, mate.
Yeah, but then you've got to either leave. You've got to leave some money aside, or you know, I mean, I don't think you could possibly bench Greenwood in week 1, but I mean, if you're leaving the rest of them on your bench, I mean, you could be having a poor game week 1 just to captain Fernandes in week 2. So it's gone a bit awkward, that. But, I mean, I don't think there's anything... They're all... It might end up, and obviously none of them are on that quality of a City attack or a Liverpool attack yet, but it might end up in that situation where once you've made your mind up who you want, just stick with it, because otherwise you're going to be chasing your tail on it, like people do with, you know, Sterling and De Bruyne and Mahrez, or, you know, oh, shall I get Salah? And then you get Salah and Mane scores 2, and, you know, so I think the same is going to apply with United. It's like, once you've made your mind up who you want, just stick with them, because it'll come round for all of them, I think. But personally, I've not even thought of a way of getting any of them in yet. I'm just gonna let them see how it goes for a few weeks. Fernandes, I don't know. I'm still not convinced, and I know it sounds mad, and I know people think, oh, you know, the amount of set pieces and screamers we were getting at the end of last season. I do worry that, you know, if the set pieces dry up, which, you know, could easily happen, you know, and you stop knocking 30-yard screamers in off the underside of the bar, you might be looking at a player who's a 300-point a season to a 170, which is still a good tally. But, you know, if you captain him every other week and you're 10.5 million, you might think, oh, I'm only getting an assist every 2 weeks now. And then...
If it's 170 points, it will be worth paying the extra 1 million or 1.5 million more for one of the other guys, or saving the money with a Martial or Rashford, for example, if he's going to hit 170.
Yeah.
The thing is, you wrote a brilliant article for us about the idea that perhaps some of the returns are unsustainable. One of the arguments I've kept using is I feel like we've got an XG crowd with Fernandes and a non-XG crowd.
Yeah.
There's those who on the XG know that he's been performing so far and away, plus are the penalties sustainable?
Yeah.
You sent me the article, then he got another one against Seville.
I know, I know.
Before we'd even had time to post the article.
Yeah.
And then there's the other people like me who, for me, it was never, most of the listeners will know, it's never really about numbers for me. For me, it was watching what he did against Tottenham in game week 30 and realising that I should have had him back when we were still playing football in February and March, and I had to act. It was enough. He was the standout for me, because anything within 30 yards, he will either A, hit the target, or B, pick the right pass. So it's interesting. I was just looking at the numbers on shots taken for all of the big four forwards from game week 30 onwards. Now, we know Fernandes has got a couple of penalties in there, but actual just shots. Fernandes 25, Rashford 21, Martial 20, Greenwood 17.
Yeah.
So I think if you take out the penalties, and it's worth saying obviously Rashford had one as well, then Fernandes is still top of that list for shots. Admittedly, there's obviously more from outside the box. He's the one that's capable of hammering it in from 25, 30 yards. And therefore, from that perspective, of course, he's going to get the odd goal that's going to outperform his XG, because the XG on them is going to be 0.05 or something, right?
Yeah.
No, well,
it's the players around him. So it's just to cut you for 1 second, Gary. It's like if you've got Fernandes and he's got Martial and Rashford and Greenwood around him, how can he not create assists? Those guys are good finishers, especially Greenwood, Martial.
Yeah.
How can he not create assists with the team around him? Sometimes you get a standout player who, like a Grealish maybe, who's class, but he hasn't got players around him that can keep up with him. I think Fernandes has, and that's to add to what James is saying. Well, I'm so firmly in that Fernandes is one of the first names on my team sheet.
I'm not so sure about that anymore, by the way. But go on, Gary.
I still am. I'm convinced.
Yeah, I think all of the points there are correct. That I wouldn't argue too much against them. But it's just the goals and the shots and the penalties. I'm not that concerned about. But the assists, I just think, if you think of some, I mean, I don't want to compare him to De Bruyne, because De Bruyne's, you know, a different level again to him. But if you think of a De Bruyne assist in your mind, it's always in that right channel, knocks it across, and usually Aguero or a Sterling, they're in front of the keeper from 7 yards. Fernandes' assists, none of them are like that. They've all been, the scorer has always done something exceptional to create the assist, if that makes sense. And there hasn't been that many of his assists where he's just rolled it across and someone's tapped it in. So, I don't know. I mean, look, I say all this, and then Crystal Palace, it'll be 1 goal, 2 assists, and everyone will say you're off. You know, you're talking nonsense. I have just had a little niggle in my mind that, can he do it again?
I think a good example for me is you take his last return of the season was obviously a penalty against Leicester.
Yeah.
Now the pass for Martial, instantly. So I mean, that should have been assist, and he's ended up with the goal.
Yeah.
So you could reverse that on itself.
No, I know
example.
it's not.
It's the vision to play that pass instantly into fast forwards who are going to go and run onto it. It's a different kind of creator to De Bruyne as well. You remember with City as well, everybody tends to play 10 yards deeper against Man City as well. So that direct through ball like Fernandes for Martial in that game is actually probably more difficult for De Bruyne into an Aguero, for example. Fernandes doesn't think twice. It's always, for me, looking for what can I create? And quite often, he actually probably overdoes it in terms of his creativity, trying too much. But that's a great thing. He is constantly kind of trying to create and find one of those front three.
I think you guys did really well post-lockdown without the crowds as well. I think if you look at the teams that were able to keep the ball well and break teams down, I think United, you had a couple of games that were a little bit more difficult, you know, the likes of West Ham and what have you. But apart from that, you, on the whole, if I'm looking at which teams impressed me without any fans in the stadium, I think you guys did, because you get given the ball a lot. There was so many games where was it the Palace game? Maybe you just had possession for such large chunks of it. It was like, it was boring, but you kept the ball and you managed to break them down.
Yeah, it's interesting that, because I thought before we went back after lockdown, I thought we would do well because there wouldn't have been that pressure on us as Manchester United to go and dominate the game, because Solskjaer prefers playing on the counter attack really, and if there's no crowd in, you don't have to sort of play to the crowd in terms of dominating the ball. But like you say, we didn't. We scored a couple of goals on the counter attack, but none of the performances were really. We were pretty much dominating most of the games we played in, apart from a couple towards the end when the legs seemed to go a bit. So yeah, I mean, if that form continues on again, and we've got quite a soft, well, it looks soft on paper anyway, opening set of fixtures. So yeah, I mean, and I think I don't know how many other teams it'll affect, but you know, if you like the England games just before the season starts, they might come in at a good time for someone like a Rashford, because I think Rashford's a bit like Harry Kane in a way, in that if he's not fit, if he's not fit, he can look awful, and as soon as he is fit, he can look electric. And them England games are the 5th and the 8th of September, and that seems to be going a bit under the radar, just in general, that there's 2 England games in the week before the season starts. If that can just sharpen up a Rashford or well, obviously a Kane, but in Man United sense, if it can sharpen a few of them up, we might do quite well out of those international games, which maybe other teams won't, because they probably don't want the fixtures there.
If I had to pin you to a wall now, Gary, and say you're going to buy one of these front four in game week 2, if you had to decide right now, who would it be? Pogba, thank you very much. That's the end of the show.
Yeah, no, I think
the forgotten man.
Yeah, I think Pogba will play too deep now to be an FPL asset, and obviously the penalties have been taken off him. So, yeah, unfortunately, I think if I had to, I'd probably say Martial. He was the 3rd cheapest of the 4, but he probably hasn't really got anyone who can play. He's probably the most nailed in a way, even ahead of Fernandes, because we haven't got anyone else who can really play centre forward apart from Igalo. So Martial probably, just because of what, you know, Martial over Fernandes is $1.5 million saving there. And at the start of the season, you can do a lot with $1.5 million. So Martial for now. Greenwood, if we don't buy Sancho, Greenwood's got to come into your thinking. But I think he's an awkward price, isn't he? $7.5 million. You know, it depends.
I think all 4 of those assets have been underpriced. I think Rashford looks like he's going to go off as a brilliant little differential. At the time of recording, he's around about 7% owned. It's going to be a brilliant differential. You can't really see that increasing between now and kickoff with the lack of fixture, basically.
That was Rashford, you said 7%.
Rashford, yeah.
I tell you what, if he plays 130 minutes in them 2 England games and looks sharp and all that, he could be that could be unbelievable. Then I didn't realise he was that lowly owned.
The bit that concerns me most on Rashford, and it's worth saying, obviously he's now a midfielder, so him and Martial, some of their points that were scored from last season, I think basically over the course of the whole season, if you returned it to attacker and midfielder and swapped them, Martial would have scored exactly what Rashford scored, and Rashford would have scored exactly what Martial scored, basically flipped.
Yeah.
But over the lockdown period, Martial would well outscore Rashford in my from the data. It would be the difference basically in what they scored during lockdown was 35 FPL points. Martial got more. Now it wouldn't be as big, obviously, because you're moving some of the points. That's still a distance that Martial will be beating Rashford by. And obviously for myself, I kind of want to look at that lockdown data. For me, he transformed into a different beast, Anthony Martial, and I think, for myself, the first places I will be targeting will be Martial and or Fernandes, personally. But Rashford's going to be a brilliant differential, and you can't discount Greenwood either. So I think they're all brilliant choices. And I think for a lot of people, it may end up coming down to value and expectations, or if you're part of the XG crowd, you're probably going to go without Fernandes. If you're struggling financially, you might end up starting with Greenwood because I'd want one of them, for example. I don't think, as long as you don't add, and the closer it gets to obviously the start of the season, it's looking less and less likely now. I don't think any of them are bad choices at all. I think like any one of the four could go mental when they all could.
This is the challenge. I felt the post-lockdown, we were in a blessed position where we could afford to have, because Greenwood was so cheap, you could afford to have three. Now I'm thinking with the other players, I don't know if I can afford, I have to make choices here. I'm very similar to James's thinking, apart from I think Fernandes is top for me because of the goal and assist and potential there that he's got as a midfielder, followed by Martial, I just think as a pivotal talisman striker. And then assuming you don't buy Sancho, then Mason Greenwood. I mean, Greenwood picked up 103 points. He played the equivalent of 14 games last season. So he could well easily be, if he played the entire season and no Sancho, he could well easily top 210, 220 points, 7.5 million. And they really are a front three, right? Rashford, Martial and Greenwood are all in and around the box so much. It's not like they're wide men putting crosses in. They're in and around the box.
Listen, none of the three of us fucking classified them as midfielders, right?
No, that's true. I really think for me it's that order is Fernandes, followed by Martial, followed by Greenwood, and then Rashford, which seems like so unfair on the guy to make him fourth.
Yeah,
sorry, Marcus Rashford.
I think I might have Rashford. It's hard. I mean, there's not a lot between any of them. I think Rashford might end up being the one. But with time, because just on the comment about the lockdown, obviously Rashford was quite away. Just bear in mind he was just easing his way back from that serious back injury he had. I mean, if the lockdown hadn't come, he probably wouldn't have made he was struggling to make the Euros, wasn't he? Yep. So that might have he probably wasn't at 100% fitness then. So, like I say, if he plays well in those two England games, and then has a week off anyway because we haven't got a game, he might be the one as a, like you say, 9.5 million, so you save a bit of a differential. But like I said, whichever one you buy, I think you've got to stick with, because if you keep chasing your tail on it, you're gonna suffer. Look, look at the end of last season. Greenwood got 2 against Bournemouth, and then Martial got 2.
Yeah, we said that. Yeah, at the
against
time.
Sheffield United, and Fernandes ticked along, and so wherever you go, just stick with it. Don't.
It's interesting that, because we've had that conversation so much about Salah and Mane, for example, haven't we?
Yeah.
And we did mention it. It felt like there was a lot of points chasing during lockdown, and I remember there was one game week before me and Suja went, well, Rashford's the one who's due. Don't fucking sell him, right? And I think he had a goal and assist maybe against Bournemouth or something. So, I completely agree. The problem with it is I think a lot of people might make the wrong choice at the start.
Well, yeah, of course, yeah. I suppose unlike a Salah or a Mane, you're looking at the same amount of money, whereas in this instance, if it is Martial that goes off and you're on Fernandes, you're going to think, I can save £1.5 million there, and then that turns, Danny Ings into Kane or whatever the maths is. But you still might miss it. You still might end up kicking yourself. So, yeah. It'd be a tough one.
Before you go, Gary, where do you think you finished this year? Or what looks good?
What looks good? I think a good season for us is getting closer to the top because we've, despite finishing third last season, we actually finished more points off first than we did the season before. So in terms of a title bid, we're going backwards. So I think we're not going to cut that gap, let's be honest, but we need to get a lot closer. A good season is third and a trophy. Where we'll finish?
Third with a trophy, I would say. I honestly think if third with a trophy,
about right.
Realistic.
I don't see us finishing third if we don't do any more business. If Chelsea buy a goalkeeper, we won't get anywhere near the top three.
I agree to the extent I think if Chelsea buy a goalkeeper, they might better you next year. If they don't, I don't really fucking care who they buy. I don't think they'll finish above you.
Yeah, if they don't, and I don't think Arsenal have strengthened enough. Spurs, I don't think have strengthened enough.
Thanks, Gary. Let's cut you off now.
Well, nothing that Spurs have done. You still got Mourinho.
I'm aware. Apparently, it was amazing business, mate. But let's move on.
Yeah. So, but just into Leicester. I think Leicester will struggle that next season. Yeah. So I think we'll be. If Chelsea buy a keeper, I think we'll be fourth or fifth. And if Chelsea don't buy a keeper, we'll probably be third, but so 20 points behind.
You could see someone from that gap below potentially finishing above you for Champions League spots. I can't at the moment.
No, I mean, look, and I'm not just saying this because it's you, James, but if Harry Kane stays fit for the season and Tottenham defend like a Mourinho team can defend, you can easily finish ahead of United, can't you? But if Harry Kane...
Let's talk for another half hour.
I was gonna. For me, when I look at the likes of the clubs you mentioned there, Chelsea, United, Tottenham, and Arsenal, the first thing I look to see is how do I think you will do against all not the teams in and around you, but the rest. Because quite often you get unstuck in games that you should win, like a Palace or a Newcastle. Not just you, I mean these clubs. Whereas I feel like, you're right in mentioning that. Whereas I feel like United are better equipped to systematically take apart teams where they should win. And then how close you get to Liverpool, City and what have you is then dictated by what you do with their teams around you. Chelsea, with their attacking power, can also probably steamroller most of the games they should win. Arsenal and Tottenham, the jury's still a little bit out on whether or not they'll be able to. I see them slipping up.
Oh, we beat West Ham, no problem, mate.
Bottom
3/4 of the league more than the others. But then when you get into games against those around you, your derby with City or games against Liverpool, it is a one match where you could claw some points back. So I want to, if nothing else, I want to see you at least consistently keep beating the ones you should, and then have one or two good results against the teams around you and a decent cup run. That's what I see happening for United. And because you've got quite a few different points of attack now, whether it's Fernandes unpicking it or Martial getting in behind or Greenwood just bursting a hole in the net with his left foot because, my God, he hits a football. You've got lots of different ways of scoring. And I think that's why I fancy you to finish third quite comfortably, because you'll win most of the games that you should win, if that makes sense.
That's also why picking the right FPL asset for Manchester United is going to be quite difficult.
Yeah. And the other thing, if we don't buy Sancho, I haven't actually looked at our Champions League games, the league games either side of it, but our squad isn't that big at all. If we get a tricky Champions League group, which I think we will because our recent seedings won't be that hot. If we get a tricky Champions League group, there could be a lot of rotation there because we haven't got the squad of a City or some of the other Chelsea now. So that might be something to be aware of as well. That you might think, oh, I've got the right one, and then we're going to get at least one of the big boys in our Champions League group, and then rotations right back on the cards, which it wasn't really last season for United. You could pick our first 11 most weeks. There's no rotation really.
I would have thought, Gary, because of the Europa League win a few years ago, you would still be at least second seeds. You've done well in Europa League again this year. And actually, there is quite a bit of weightage towards doing quite well in Europa League.
we've got a Champions League quarter final sat there in the bank as well, haven't we? So,
you'll be second seeds, mate.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but
and
even then,
you could get a shit champion. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
like, you could get the champions of Russia or something, for example.
Yeah, well, hopefully.
No offense to the Russians out there, right?
Yeah,
Moscow, Suj.
Yeah, that's Russia and Ireland we've offended today.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly.
We've done quite well.
You've kicked off the Correspondence Week with a bang, as we always knew you would. You know you're United, you know your football, and you're a solid FPL manager as well. We've learned Lindelof over Shaw, De Gea over Henderson, Fernandes is not worth it, and
well,
oh God,
and don't
Gary's in the XG crowd, I think, mate.
There we go.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm that much. That's why I tried to do it actually looking at the goals rather than just saying, the XG was 0.1. I wanted to actually look at them so you could look at it as a non-XG.
It was a great article. We will link it again.
Yeah, lovely.
Gary, thank you so much for joining us. Anybody who is a first-time listener or hasn't heard or interacted with Gary, it's Is My Cap Playing on Twitter. You can go and find him there. He'll happily answer and help with any Manchester United related queries. And all I'm going to say, Gary, is I really hope before the end of this season, we have a live 2 in Manchester and we can actually sit down and have a drink.
Yeah, you have to.
Before the end of the season.
If 10 lots of 10 of us all walk into the same pub at the same time, no one will know, will they?
No, exactly. No, I think we'll be lucky if it's before anywhere. It may be before January. It's not going to be a while.
Before the next decade.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Thanks, Gary.
Cool. Thank you so much. As always, to all the listeners, make sure you've hit the notification bell and subscribe wherever you're listening to your podcasts. This was one of 20 that are coming at you in the next 5 days with the correspondence of every single Premier League club, and you'll want to know as soon as they go live. You'll get more great insight, as you just have done. Anything else to add, James?
No, let's rock on to the next one.
Good stuff. Ciao for now.
Thanks, Gary. All the best, everyone. Cue music, please, man child.